Cool. So I think we've reached capacity and reached the starting time around the same point. So I'll start. Welcome, everybody. You may be wondering why there's one of me and there's two names up here. This talk was co-written with Martijn Verburg, who many of you know. All the good parts are his, but I optimized him out of the process. So it's just me. He hasn't complained yet. So I'm Holly Cummins. I'm a lifelong IBMer. And what I do at the moment is I work in the cloud garage. Oh no, unfun. The thing you should have tested beforehand. Huh. I let Mark use my clicker this morning, and that was the fatal mistake. It doesn't really have a power switch. It's kind of... I mean, I have been riding my luck for a while, because about every 2 years I say to someone, you know, this thing has never run out of batteries. So I think I've just hit the battery point, so we'll step away from the clicker. Luckily, there wasn't a big song and dance component in this talk anyway, or it would have fallen flat. So let's try... Oh, no, it's not the clicker. It's just a complete technological failure. This is really exciting. Right. Oh, yeah. Okay. I have no idea what happened, and I'm a bit scared because I can't actually reproduce, but that's okay. So we'll talk on this slide for a while, and if we can't move to any other slides, then that's okay. So, as I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted by the total collapse of the technology I was using, I work for IBM. I'm a developer in the cloud garage. So what we do is we help our clients innovate, and we do that. We want to help them innovate effectively and rapidly. And the way we do that is with what we call the cloud garage method. It's something we're really proud of. We've combined agile practices, particularly XP, lean startup, design thinking, and none of those are new, but the combination is kind of new and kind of cool. And so we've got this website, which we call the Garage Method website. There's a whole bunch of sections in it, but one of the key components of the Garage Method is a fun work environment. So that means I'm actually professionally required to have fun. So I know all about fun. So you may be asking, is this a fun talk? And some of you probably will be hoping that this is a fun talk. So I have to disappoint you, because this is not a fun talk. This is a talk about fun. It's just a different order of words, but it makes a really big difference. So lower your expectations now. No fun here. Because fun is important, so we have to take it seriously. So what I've devised, with Martijn's help, is the 20-step plan to achieve fun. So the first thing you have to do is, if you care about it, you need to measure it. So qualify your fun metrics. And then you need to have some accountability for fun, right? Whose job is it to make sure it happens? So you need a chief fun officer. Then you need to think about what your processes are. So gamify all of your daily tasks to make them more fun. So for example, I just gamified the process of making my projector work, and I think some of you gamified the process of finding a seat, and I think you're all happier as a result. And have fun, it's so much about the behaviors that you have at work. So you want to codify these. So for example, every morning when you get to work, high-five people. And again, it's the role of the chief fun officer to see if this is happening. How many high fives you get is your fun metric. The chief fun officer enforces this metric. But and it's about the office environment too. So for example, you want to make sure that your office environment is conducive to work. You could have a fun ball pit. Your chief fun officer could measure the utilization of the ball pit. If the utilization of the ball pit isn't high enough, the team aren't having fun, and then you need to take disciplinary action. It's really fun to play with language, so you can introduce a fun word of the day, like frog. And again, this is great because it's so quantifiable. You can see how many people manage to use the word frog in everyday conversation. If they don't use it, they're obviously not serious about the corporate culture, not a team player. That's where the disciplinary action comes in place again. And it's about how we present ourselves, right? It's about, we don't want to be all there in suits being dull and corporate. Make people wear clown shoes. Make people wear tiaras. If they don't do it, I think you know what's coming. Not a team player. And again, you want people to have something to work towards as they become more fun. Certification is the way to do this. You want some sort of badging system, some sort of certification system for fun. People need to be able to demonstrate that they're fun enough. They need to be able to get, their moderately fun, their advanced fun badges. And again, at some point you're having so much fun it may be a bit too much for the chief fun officer. So you want autonomous teams. You want to push that responsibility down into the teams by having fun assessors in each team. So they can measure the fun, they can collect these metrics, and then they can report upwards to the chief fun officer. So again, they don't have to, they may not be responsible for the disciplinary action, but they can be giving the information to the chief fun officer so that they can do the enforcement. And again, laughter, as well as being really good medicine, clearly fun. Laugh out loud at least once a day. Ideally, it's best to laugh at something funny, but you may not always have that, so if not, just laugh randomly, and your colleagues will appreciate it, your fun quotient will go up. So everybody happy so far? Good. I did see one or two people taking photographs of this slide, and I should say now, just before anybody thinks I'm horrible, this is a joke. This is a joke. Sometimes this slide gets photographed without the right context, and then it goes around Twitter, and then I see people saying, wow, IBM, they really don't know how to have fun, do they? They're doing it all wrong. So no, it's okay. So that's enough about fun metrics. So this morning, I said I wanted to talk about you. Now I want to talk about you again. And in particular, it's the exact same question, actually. Why are you here? So what was your motivation to come to Devoxx? And how many of you looked at the schedule and you said, yeah, there's one particular talk or one or two talks that, they're going to really make the business case to send me to Devoxx? Hands up who sort of did that. Yep, it's these talks to make the business case. Yeah, about 4. Okay, so that's good. So that means it's not going to be like a huge rush of hands downwards. When I say, how many of you said, boss, I need to go so that I can learn about fun at a conference? Awesome. And, fun, it's a little bit of a dirty word, so fun's really important. We all know it's important. I'll talk more about why it's important. But we kind of don't talk about it, and we don't really tell our boss that we are at a session on fun. So this is my LinkedIn profile, and how many of you say having fun on your LinkedIn profile? No, I don't either, to be honest, right? So this is, do as I say, not as I do, because I'm not brave enough to say, yeah, what's important to me at work is having fun. I say, no, what's important to me is, building teams and cloud platforms and all this kind of stuff. And, it's the same on CVs. There's all these words that we should be putting on our CVs. I solved, I trained, I did all of these good activities. Fun is totally not in this list for pretty obvious reasons, right? Nobody's going to put in a CV for a job and say, I'm really fun-loving. Even if it's true, even if that's actually going to be a good thing for the team, we sort of pretend that we're not. Fun is this sort of horrible secret. So why is that? Why is fun one of those things that we kind of like, but we kind of don't want to tell anybody that we like? Well, it comes down to the definition of fun. And if you think fun can't be defined, you're wrong. Fun can be very precisely defined. So here is one definition of fun. I'm so sad. I love this slide. And I have never yet shown it and had people look anything other than slightly horrified when they see it. But see, if you think this slide is bad, wait till you get to the next slide. Because fun is not about fungi. Fun is a point on the intersection of engagement levels and social interaction for a given activity. At which point it's come back mushroom, all is forgiven, right? Because fun, like anything else, fun is good, but then if you put in a chief fun officer, it's not good. And another thing that makes fun not good is if it's your thesis subject. So there is a student who has done a great deal of work on fun, and I imagine it's one of those horrible cocktail party situations where someone says, what do? And you say, oh, I study fun, and people sort of go, oh, so you're really fun then. And then the conversation sort of falls flat because the expectations are so high, you can't actually meet it. And then they read your thesis, and they realize it's things like a qualitative scale of the dimensions of fun and a rationale for the importance of fun and quotes. And, it just sort of goes on, and, it becomes quite unfun. So I think actually a better way to define fun isn't by reading theses. It's a bit like art, right? I know fun when I see it. So what is fun? Doing something for the first time, something novel, that's really fun. Doing something that you're good at, that's so satisfying. Completing a task, getting that little tick and going chunk off the to-do list, that's really cool. Fast feedback, again, it's really good. It's horrible if you do something and then you don't hear for a week or 2 or 3. But if you do something and someone immediately says, yeah, cool, that's good. And so, coming back to combining those two things, if you can create something new, that's so cool. And I think that's why the maker movement is so popular. So no talk on fun is complete without Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And fun really fits in at the top part of this. And it's not just one of these, it's a few of these. So, being safe, very, very good. Not actually fun. But once we get into the social engagement, that's pretty fun. Once we start feeling good about ourselves, that's really fun. And then that sort of amorphous peak at the top, the self-actualization. It's good, it's fun. So ignore those, focus on the top, because luckily we're all safe at Devox. So if we want to dig in a bit deeper without going all the way down into the thesis, what's the psychology of fun? Well, it comes down to the brain chemistry, really. The brain has pleasure centers, and when you do something fun, they get triggered, hormones are involved, it's all good. So how do you measure that? Well, this is again from the same thesis, and this is the funtinuum, and you measure fun on 2 axes, and it's the intersection of these axes. So one is your engagement level, and the other is the social interaction level. So that's the funtinuum. And if you remember just one thing from this talk, you can remember the funtinuum, and then you can talk about it to people and impress people. Maybe. So how does this relate to technology? Well, programming is fun, right? We all know programming is fun. That's why we're here. And I think programming is sort of interesting in terms of fun because it's got 2 kinds of fun, or it gives fun to 2 different kinds of thinkers. So, one is I think sometimes people who don't program think it's just really dry and mathematical, and of course it's not. It's such a creative activity. We're making things, we're solving problems. But there is that logical element as well. It is about that problem-solving aspect and figuring out the right steps to solve a problem. But I think, actually, the real reason that programming is fun is just that we get to control stuff. On a good day, not on a bad day, but, on a good day, we say to the computer, do this, and it does it. And it's amazing. Like, how often do we get to say, do this, and it happens? Pretty much only in front of our computers, right? So not all programming languages are created equal. I think definitely some programming languages are more fun than others. I think programming languages are getting more fun as well, which is kind of a cool trend in our industry because there's less low-level boring stuff that we have to do. So it's time for shows of hands. Who thinks Clojure is the most fun language? No. One hand. Poor Clojure. Java, most fun language? Yeah, about a third, which is a little bit sad since we're at a mostly Java conference, but could be worse. How about Groovy? Who thinks Groovy is the most fun language? One hand. Poor Groovy. I'm sure a few years ago we would have had way more hands. Okay. JavaScript? 4 or 5 hands. Plus, I think I definitely heard some boos in there. So there's some people who have it defined as whatever the opposite of fun is, that's what JavaScript is. Okay, Python? Yeah, cool. Ruby? I did my first Ruby project this past summer. And I think it was probably because I didn't know what I was doing, but it was not fun. It was so not fun. Scala? Yeah, few hands. Visual Basic? Swift? Yeah, a couple of takers for Swift. Swift is interesting. I think the language is good. I think the tooling is absolutely awful. which makes, for me, coding a bit of a misery. Yeah, you're right, actually. Yeah, okay, big cheer for the Kotlin crowd. Yep, no, so that was just hands. So because Kotlin's not on the slide, we need a different rule. So actual noise for the Kotlin people. Yay, cool. Yeah, but you're quite right. So Kotlin is, well, it's not the same as Groovy at all, but I think it's taking some of that niche away. So I think what we discovered there is a couple of things. Not all programming languages are equal. There's some tribalism in our choices of programming languages, but most importantly, I think all of you who cheered at the end had good fun. So, it's that sort of doing things is fun. So why are our workplaces not fun? Well, one reason is probably just that we're not actually cheering out loud a lot of the time in our workplaces because people would tell us it was noisy. But it has a lot to do with the management model in our workplaces as well. So things are changing, but a classic organizational model has this super hierarchical structure where you've got the managing director, and then you've got all these things, and then you've got the org charts, and people pass the org charts around and care a lot about the org charts, and it's really not very interesting. And how technology fits in there is just something that drains cost, and it's a cost center. So where did this model come from? Well, where it came from, and the reason it seems so very rigid and hierarchical is because it actually goes back way deeper than the 80s or 90s. It goes back to military structures. So militaries were the first large-scale employers, and they were a particularly interesting employer because most large-scale employers, they'll say things like, write code, and you go, yeah, okay, I can do that. Whereas the military, as an employer, would say, go over here and you're going to get shot and, possibly dismembered. So you have to have quite a lot of a control structure for people when you say that to them to go, yeah, okay, yep, here I am off to my certain death. You have to have those control structures, or people say, well, no, I'm just going to go have fun over here, thanks. So, anything that involves people killing each other, you need that tight control or the system falls apart. So, not so fun. And that pattern of control and the sort of the structures that people knew could make large organizations like the military work well, they then just sort of persisted into the workplace as a way to make things work at scale. And there's other factors that really go against fun in the workplace. So a lot of our cultural values stem from Puritan values, and those values say having fun is wrong. The Puritans took it really to extremes, and they said not only is drinking wrong, Christmas is wrong. We're not at that level, but we still do have a little part of us that that's cultural heritage that says, if I'm having fun, I must be doing something bad. So the good news is this is actually totally wrong. All we need to do is get that voice out of our heads, and we're in a good place, because there's a lot of evidence that says in the workplace, fun is a good thing. It has a lot of value. So this is the IBM Watson IoT Center in Munich. I haven't actually been to it, but I really want to see it because from this picture it looks pretty amazing. And the thing that's inside the building as you go in is this from one of the IBM fellows, and he says, you must take the time to play, to be creative. And I just love the fact that they took this quote and they said, that's important enough that we're going to put it on the wall because this is so core to our values that we're going to talk about playing in the workplace. And of course, when we play, some of us get better toys than others. IoT, I think one of the reasons IoT is so fun is because it does involve a lot of play. And if you're in the IBM IoT Center, then one of the people who are sort of partners in that building is BMW. So then they get better toys than others, and they get to play with BMW i8s, which is nothing to do with why I want to go there, honest. But it's sort of leaving aside IoT. That's one area where okay, play is good, play is fun, but it works all across. So after this morning, I overheard Steve Poole talking to Mark Hazel, and Steve was saying to Mark, "Do you get nervous when you present?" And Mark was saying, "No, not really." And so then Steve said, "Oh, okay, so are you very blasé about it?" Mark, no, not really. And then we eventually realized, actually, what Mark was doing when he was on stage was having fun. And that made him a really effective presenter. Whereas if he'd been nervous, he wouldn't have been good, right? If he stood up here going, welcome to DevOps UK, I hope you have a nice time. And if he'd been blasé, if he hadn't cared, if he'd just been like, yeah, whatever, that wouldn't have been good either. But it was that fun that gave him the energy that made him interesting to watch. So one of the things about this you can see, hopefully you can sort of see that Mark has some energy. I look absolutely miserable here, so I couldn't find a picture where we both looked like we were having fun. And this is the first picture I had, which really wasn't very convincing, as Mark is having fun, and I don't think he could have looked much more unhappy, really, but that just goes to show that cameras sometimes lie. But it's not just about Mark, it is about the business as a whole. So there's a ton of research that shows fun is good for business. So, there's lots and lots of papers out there. You can go and look for them, and lots of papers. And the reason fun is good is because it leads to a whole bunch of indirect benefits. So it leads to less sick leave. So again, that's really similar to what we heard in the keynote this morning. It's about taking care of yourself. And if you take care of yourself, then you get fewer of these nasty side effects that affect your physical health. People actually work harder if they're having fun, and they're more productive. So there was another study, and it said your brain, when it's got a positive mindset, is 31% more productive than your brain at neutral or stress. So that's a huge productivity difference. If you could go to your employers and say, yeah, I'm going to be 31% more productive, they'd be like, yeah, tell me what you need to do. And then you would say, I need to watch cat videos. And they'd go, well, maybe not. I said anything, but I draw the line at cat videos. And I think, when we talk about positive mindset, that doesn't feel a perfect match for fun, because there's lots of ways to be positive without actually having fun, or rolling in the aisles. But there's evidence about fun in particular and laughing in particular. So individuals who've just watched a comedy video have 12% higher productivity. So there's a literal correlation between cat videos and improved productivity. And I think, the reason for this is that we work really hard, and your brain does need that break. And in that break, that's when you figure out what the reason for the build break is. That's the when you figure out how to test that thorny thing. It's when you're not actually thinking about it, and you sort of, your brain approaches the problem sideways while you're watching cat videos. There's a lot of other benefits as well that aren't just about productivity. So this is a Dutch company. And what they did was they said, well, everybody loves Lego trains, obviously. So Info Support said, yes, we will pay for Lego trains for our employees, and they will do good things on them. And they did all sorts of interesting things. So they used it as a test bed to learn new technology. But I think, as a business, it meant that they could then go to conferences and say, recruitment is up because we can tell people we have Lego trains and they want to come work for us, because who doesn't want to work with Lego trains? So far so good. Hopefully you'll all now run out and go back to the workplace and put on a 24-hour loop of cat videos. But well, maybe not, because there is a limit to how much fun you can expect to have. And if you're wondering, see, this is a picture of lots of fungi. See it? But, there are some things that we have to do that probably aren't fun, that are valuable or useful. For many of us, that's GDPR at the moment. You've got to do it. But, okay, hands up who thinks GDPR is fun. Okay. And that's sort of nice as well. That's sort of another aspect of it, is that there's some things that some of us are just like, please no. And then there's always one or two in the room who are like, yeah, that's my favorite thing. I'll do that. It's like, yes, please. And this is why you want diverse teams, is so that you have someone in the team who goes, GDPR compliance, my favorite activity. Let me take care of that for us. But digressing back from GDPR, if everybody in the team said, I'm not going to do GDPR because that's boring, you probably would have a problem. So that as a team, you are going to need some self-discipline. And there's another aspect as well, which is just because it's fun doesn't actually mean it's good. So there are some fun things that or some things that people find fun that are destructive, So an example of this is, a lot of the trolling on the internet, someone is having fun. It's not the person on the other end of it, but, someone thinks, yeah, this is great fun, I'm having lols. Again, it's sort of, in Apocalypse Now, the person who's putting the napalm down is having great fun. The person who's on the other side, not so much. So, when you think about fun, that doesn't mean you can be selfish. You do think, is everyone having fun? And sometimes it's a little bit more subtle than napalm. So a few years ago, people thought Groovy was fun in a way that perhaps they don't now. And one of our developers had a task, and he said, I'm the only one working on this task. I'd like to learn Groovy. I'm going to have a bit of fun, so I'm going to do it in Groovy. And that was all fine until a while later, he left the company. And then the rest of us had deadlines and day jobs and everything, and we had to maintain his code too, of course, and it was in Groovy. And we sort of just all went, I don't understand this. This is too hard. I have too much to be doing anyway. Please, could he have just, stuck with the same thing as the rest of us? So fun does need to be responsible. So far we've talked about why fun is good, when too much fun is not so good. But that's no good unless you actually can get fun and achieve fun. So, here's some things that don't involve chief fun officers that you can do to get that fun into the workplace. So the first few times that I gave this talk, I said step one was to get rid of the find the unfun things and then get rid of them. And then a few people came up to me afterwards and told me about their workplaces. And I realized that actually there is a step zero, which is you have to stop prohibiting fun. This seems like it should be really obvious, but apparently it's not. So someone told me the saddest story, which is that they had a culture that people would bring in cakes and leave them in the kitchen and then send an email around saying, oh, there's cakes in the kitchen. And they got told by HR to stop sending these emails telling people that there was cake because I'm not even sure what the rationale was. I don't know if it was that people perceived it as spam or they were worried that their employees were going to eat too much cake and their health would fall off. I didn't even understand it, but it was just so sad. So I think hopefully he's not with that company anymore. And I heard another story, which was many years ago, back when LAN parties and that kind of thing were a thing. It was a distributed support organization. They had offices in North America. They had offices in the UK. The team really didn't ever get a chance to meet, and they only worked together in these highly stressed situations. But what they would do is they would use, in the server room, they had a few extra little servers set up, and they would play Quake. And this seemed really good because they all got to know each other. They built up this really strong team culture. And management came and said, if you're in the office after 5:30 p.m., you need to be doing work, which I just don't even understand, right? Because probably what would happen realistically, leaving aside all of the sort of the team benefits, is they'd be there, they'd do a bit of Quake, and then they'd go, oh, and we'll just fix this defect here. But management were actually kicking them out of the office in order to ensure that no fun happened in the office. So leaving those sad stories aside, hopefully none of you have similar workplace cultures, and you just have workplace cultures which are a bit more like this one, where you have a few things that are unfun. And there's an interesting thing, because a lot of really positive things are fun, like adding value. If a process is unfun, that's a good sign that, this is a red flag. Maybe it's not actually adding value. A lot of these things that we hate doing because we know that they're waste. So this is a lot of things that are fun and a lot of things that are not fun. I'm going to talk about these in a little bit more detail, but I have this up so that if you want to have your pocket checklist to fun and not fun, in case you couldn't quite work it out for yourself, you've got those. And the good thing about this as well is we can fix these. A lot of these not fun things we can fix. So, if we can introduce pair programming, we can introduce no estimates, that gets rid of the boringness of sizing. We can streamline our processes. We can stop generating status reports by hand and have it be automatic. We can, make sure that our offices are productive, peaceful environments. We can my favorite, we can make sure that our documentation is actually findable so that you don't have to go keep asking people what the link is for the thing because your search doesn't work. Not that I'm... we can do MVP and lean processes to make sure that what we do actually gets to users who are using it, because that's really rewarding. And we can make sure that our teams are self-directed, because that autonomy makes people happy and it makes things go better. So, my personal major gripe: make it easy for people to find the information so that they don't have to keep doing things. And that means indexing, and that means using the index. And another sort of thing about a lot of our jobs is, how many here would say you spend most of your time coding? Maybe a quarter. How many of you started programming because you loved coding? Yeah, so it's a little bit sad, isn't it? We got into this job because we loved coding, and then we sort of stopped coding. So I saw this, and this was what I had to reply, because at the time I was doing pretty much no coding at all, and that coding was the thing I liked most, and I wasn't doing it. So the cool thing is, it doesn't always work, but I was able to fix this. So I went to, I was in a senior role, I went to my management team and I said, hey, we're really short-staffed. And so what you're going to need to do is put me onto projects. And we all know interruptions are bad. So when you put me onto these projects, you have to cancel my meetings for a month so that I can work with dedication on these projects. And it actually worked, which is really cool. So my meetings just went away for a month. It was amazing. And the reason I was able to make this case was because we've got a lot of evidence that interruptions are really unfun. They're just nerve-shredding. They destroy your productivity. It takes you so long to get back into the zone after the interruption that you lose way more time. So what we try and do is we try and have an interrupt pair. So we say, we know people are going to need to ask things, but let's sort of have a blast radius so that only one pair gets interrupted, and then everybody else can just work away. And that means, they know that their day is going to be, they've got the right expectations, their day is going to be a bit fragmented, that's okay. Everybody else can get into the zone. So because we pair program pretty much 100%, and because when you take someone away from a pair, that is way more disruptive than taking just one person away, it's pretty much doubly disruptive. We keep our schedule free of meetings. So we have an iteration planning meeting at the beginning of the week, we have a retrospective at the end, and then the rest of it, we just say, yep, we are doing pair programming. Pair programming has a lot of other benefits. The main one is that it avoids code reviews. So code reviews, I think, are horrible. They're stressful. They don't actually tend to improve code quality because people will do one of two things. They'll either bike shed about, well, I didn't like your semicolon there, and I noticed that there was a space in amongst the tabs there, who cares? Or they'll spot really fundamental design flaws that need to be fixed, but by the time the code review happens, someone's been developing for 2 weeks, it's too late to do a redesign. So instead, people go, yeah, this is a really terrible design, but oh well, I guess we just keep going with it. And that's not good. Whereas with pair programming, you get that feedback faster, and so then hopefully you avoid that sort of really big, pointless criticism at the end. Another thing I really hate is estimates. I know some people like them. I find story pointing meetings incredibly boring. And the good news is that there's actually good evidence that they're pointless. So I'm able to make the case to say, we're not going to do story pointing meetings because actually they're not going to improve our measurement of our velocity compared to just writing sensibly sized stories anyway, and then just counting the number of stories in the backlog, and then that's a whole bunch of process that just goes away and a whole bunch of unfun that goes away. So coming back to the GDPR discussion, there are some things that do need to be done that maybe aren't so fun, and I think if you're prototyping and then you get to the stage where you need to get that scaled out to production, and the things you need to do probably aren't very exciting. They're things like adding logging. Most of us don't really like doing that, but I think usually there is this sort of satisfaction of knowing, what I did is good enough that now it's going to go out to production, so that kind of compensates for the the lack of fun. So we try and do it so that we only do things like adding logging if we know it's actually going to make a difference. We don't start out by adding logging because it's really boring. If we know it's going to make a difference, we add the logging. And this is true more generally about prototyping. So we were talking to a client, and it was a large company. They had an innovation department, but she was really keen, and it makes total sense. She didn't want to be the department where they do something and then it dies a death, and they do something and it dies a death. That's not innovation. That's just wasting money. You want to innovate and then have it go out and become real, and that's where the actual job satisfaction is. Testing, however, should not be testing is different from logging. Logging is boring, testing is not. So testing, that's not got to be something that's not part of your hardening phase. That's got to be something that you do right from the beginning. Test-driven development can be really satisfying because it has a sort of a gamification aspect to it. So, you've got this red thing, and then you make it go green, and it just feels so good, and you're like, yeah. Automation is another one where I think there's this sort of double win. It's good for the developers, and then it's good for everything, because computers don't have any expectation that they're going to have fun. That may change, and when it does, there may be some awkward conversations to have. But until it does, let the computer do the tedious tasks. It's what it's for. And then as a bonus side effect, automating stuff is really fun. So you get the fun of automating, and then the horrible task goes away, and it's a good win. Reporting status is so boring. I have a feeling as well that collecting status is really boring as well. So there's just get rid of it. Make sure that the status is that you track tasks in a fine-grained way so that nobody ever needs to come and ask you for your status. They can just go to your Trello board, they can go to your Kanban board, and it just means that a whole bunch of stuff goes away. Similarly, have a day. This is old news now, but you want to have a daily stand-up meeting because you don't want a team that goes away and for 2 weeks you never see them, and then they produce something at the end and it's wrong. You do want that daily feedback. And autonomy is absolutely critical. So one of the things that motivates us most is understanding why we're doing something and being able to choose what we're doing rather than being told what to do. And usually when people are left to make a decision, they will make the right decision. So it's about having that autonomy in the team, and it's so important for team morale, and then it gives better results as well. So once you've got rid of all the crap, what's the next step of fun? Now you can add fun in. So children learn through play, and we have this idea that when we become adults, we stop learning through play. But of course, we do still learn through play. We're just not allowed to do it as often as we'd like. But gamification is really effective as a way of motivating behaviors, but also as a way of learning. And there's 4 different kinds of play. So there's play, and that's sort of just for its own sake. There's exploration, and that's investigation. So that's when someone gives us a new technology, we do that exploration. Work has a really concrete goal at the end. And then games is kind of interesting because games have a goal, which makes it a bit like work, and it has rules, which makes it even more like work. But a game is fun in a way that work isn't necessarily. So then it's, okay, well, how do we have those rules and have that goal, but get in that fun that comes with games? And gamification is something that we've been talking about for a while. There's some really interesting gamifications that are going on. So Stack Overflow is your classic example of Stack Overflow said, how do we gamify the process of getting support and having tech questions answered? And it's been hugely successful in a way that now I don't think we can really remember how we coded before Stack Overflow. And in IBM, we do a security boot camp for some of our staff, and it's really cool because the way it works isn't that you read the material and then you do an exercise on paper. The way it works is that you have to hack the boot camp in order to get the answers out so that you can then put them in and go on to the next stage. And it's actually more practical and more educational than just doing it as like a multiple choice question or something. And it's also really, really fun because you feel like you're cheating and you're doing something cool, even though actually it's exactly what they want you to do. TDD, has this really strong gamified aspect because you want to see that bar go green. And build status can be gamified as well. So some teams have, build radiators. Some people have build lights. You can take this maybe a little bit too far. So there is a whole build product, which is called the Siren of Shame, which is basically productizing build gamification. And I'm not sure whether it's a good idea, but it's actually quite funny. So they have this whole sort of infrastructure. So they have things like, you track your reputation of how often you break the build and that kind of thing. And they have the shame extruder is one of their components. And a lot of companies are using gamification for recruitment now, too. So the Army has games, and what they do is they use the games as a sort of a, if you do well at this game, then we can see that maybe you're going to do well in the Army, so why don't we suggest that to you? And Uber were doing some really weird gamification where they would get the drivers to do sort of almost a test on the passengers, and then if the passengers did well on the tests, they would suggest that they join Uber. I never quite got what the mechanics of that were, but it was an interesting sort of thing of like, how do you gamify recruitment while people are taking taxi rides? And it seemed to at least somewhat work. So what about play? Well, I think one of the main ways that we play at work is with quirkiness. We put things in that don't actually need to be there, but they're kind of cool. So my old team was the Webster Liberty team, and one of the things that we did was a site called wasdev.net, where we had a whole bunch of tutorials. And the logo for this was peace, love, and play. So it was just this nice little thing. Nobody made them have that logo, and it was just like, yeah, it's important. We're saying this is important to our culture. Easter eggs are another really classic example of nobody's going to make a developer put an Easter egg into a product. Like management don't come and say, do Easter eggs, but we kind of like doing it. Although probably I'm the only one who can read this, but this text actually, it doesn't say, developers put Easter eggs in because they're fun-loving people. It says, developers' jobs are so boring and awful that the only way they can relieve the monotony of their miserable lives is by putting Easter eggs into the products, which I assume it wasn't software developers that wrote that. I have no idea. And Google do some really cute gamification. So like if you type around some little quirks that no one's going to measure Google on how many people play tic-tac-toe, but if you type tic-tac-toe in, you actually get a little game of tic-tac-toe that you can play, and it's just cute, and it just gives you a nice feeling. So before there was OS X, there was Next. It was another company of Steve Jobs. It was a beautiful machine in many ways, and one of the things that it had, which was really nice, was it had some little Easter eggs in there. So it had a dictionary, and you could, type in things, and it would give you a picture of what it was and a definition. If you typed in gullible, which is, it's a classic joke, right? You say to someone, oh, gullible's not in the dictionary, and then you see if they look up gullible. And if you typed in gullible into that dictionary, it would find your user avatar, and it would put the user avatar back for you. Some of our teams do really sweet things as well. So we've got some Slack ops, and when you want to do a thing, you'll have this dialogue. And because it's a production train, the user that they chose for the bot is the fat controller, and they've got this whole little dialogue. So he says, "Mind the doors, please, choo choo," when it a release is about to go off, and it doesn't add to the productivity, not to the literal productivity in any way, but it's just so nice. We had a 4th birthday in the Cloud Garage the other week, and so we had a cake, which is nice. It's just that nice thing about having a nice culture. But what nobody made us do was have the blue gradient spectrum on the cake. Okay. I really wanted to get a photo that had the candles lit, but we did light the candles, but then I think we were a bit concerned about this fire alarm in our building. So we sort of lit the candles, and then nobody took a picture because we were all desperately blowing the candles out before security came and told us off. So these are all sort of quite nice things to do for fun. Fun can go horribly wrong. So, there's this idea that, if fun is good, then let's make people have fun, and that's really going to go well. In fact, it doesn't. People really recognize this. So 31% of us dislike team building activities, and that's actually an American statistic, so I suspect in the UK it's much, much higher. And if you make people do something that they don't want to do, it just isn't fun. So going back to the example of the cake, that was a really nice day for us. We all really liked it. We really enjoyed eating the cake. If management had come to us and said, you will eat cake, I'm going to measure you on how much cake you eat, it would have been a horrible day. It would have been like the worst day ever at work, especially because the cake was actually really sweet. But you can't make people have fun. And I think this sort of goes counter to some management methodologies, which is that you've got to have your KPIs, and you've got to be able to record something and measure something, and you can't know if it's working unless you measure it. So there's a story on the internet, and it was an employee, and their workplace had an office party, which is really nice, but they wanted to make sure that they were getting the reward for the office party, so they took attendance at the office party, and they had it at one of the manager's houses, which was really nice, except that he didn't want dirty employees coming in and using his toilets, so it was a 4-hour party, and they weren't allowed into the house to use the toilets. And, it's just sort of that culture of saying, you will have fun, but we're not going to look after your basic needs, and we're going to measure you on how much fun you have. Of course, it's a disaster. But, really as well, what fun can go wrong. Even if you don't take attendance at the office party, fun can go wrong if you don't fix the other stuff first. So if you put this sort of layer of fun on top of your workspace where you still have all of the status reporting and you still have really hostile code reviews and you still have all of this bad stuff, well, it's not going to be good, is it? It's still bad. And this sort of comes back to, okay, what is fun? And fun, so much of fun is about not being made to do things. So, there's this idea of like, well, what if I could get paid to do something that other people pay to do? And that sounds like it would be the most amazing thing ever. But of course, we all know that being a video game tester is not actually a very good job, even though it sounds like the dream, right? Everybody else pays to play the video games. We pay you to play the video games. You go, yeah, where do I sign up? Until you do it, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm just going to go and do another job. And I think so many of us, we have stressful jobs. We have a lot of demands on us. And even though we kind of know the theory that we should be taking care of ourselves, again, like the talk this morning, it sometimes the things fall down in the gap between that theory of let's have fun, let's take care of each other, and then the reality. So we have an internal feedback tool at IBM. It's called ACE. And one of my teammates gave me feedback recently. And again, this is sort of, maybe people in the front row can read it. But the feedback was, Holly, who gives talks on fun, works too hard and doesn't let the team members have enough fun, and Holly needs to go play more ping pong and things would work better. So it's again that gap between, I know the theory of fun, and I still find it's easy to get sucked into that, I'll have fun next week once I've got rid of the deadline. But actually, things are going to work better if you build it in. So, in conclusion, fun is really important. Fun isn't a frill on the top. Fun should be fundamental. And the way that you get the fun is, first of all, well, the first thing you do is you stop enforcing people to not have fun, because that's just obviously a bad idea. Then once you've done that, met that minimum level, then you get rid of the unfun things. And then with that, you can then add in the fun things, and you're going to have a nice culture. So I think I've got 2 minutes for questions, if there's any questions. Thank you very much, by the way.
So you mentioned that logging is not fun. How do you ensure when the production hits the fan, so to say?
Yeah,
you're not going to having too much fun with it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So the question is, since logging isn't fun, how do we answer when things go horribly wrong in production? And I think that comes back to we have to be responsible with things. So there are going to be some things that we need to do, like washing the dishes, that aren't fun. But we know if we don't do them, it's going to be really, really bad in the kitchen tomorrow. And so you want to make sure that you build in the fun, but you also take care of the basics. So, and again, it's about making sure that you do the logging at a time when it adds value. So don't do the logging as the first thing, because maybe you're going to throw that code away. Once you know that code is useful, then you do the infrastructure to say, okay, I'm safe here. And so I think I saw one more hand. Yeah.
I wanted to answer is if you're having fun, then production won't hit the fun.
That's a very good point. Yeah, in the optimum model, your code is so high quality because your team was having so much fun that your productivity and your efficiency and the quality was so good that there was no need for logging because there was never a single defect that hit production. And I could see a lot of skeptical faces. So that, again, we can dream. And I think that's probably a good point then to leave it. So again, thank you very much.